Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And on this episode, we are going to dive into one of John's favorite factions in the whole game.
Yes.
And the entirety of 40K.
Yes.
And that means John's going to have to lead this episode. And for those who have been watching for a minute, I apologize in advance for whatever is about to unfold. I truly could find no other option than to let John drive this school bus. And if we end up like the kids from the movie Trick or Treat, my bad. My bad. John, I give you free reign.
No.
All right. I'm talking about the Dark Angels now, I guess.
No. So the Dark Angels, right? Like, who are they? It's really hard to answer that question without just going to the meme, right? Because like the meme is they're all secret heretics that are like secretly against the Emperor. And what makes that hard is that they're not exactly wrong.
Some of them are. Maybe.
Yes.
Or at the least are questionable. And I think really like that's the core of a lot of the Dark Angels. Is that many of them are questionable of motivation, and that's kind of the point.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things to understand about the Dark Angels before we get into their history and what they've been doing and what they're up to is that they are an entire sect of Space Marines that are secretive monk-like, Templar-like orders of just secrets layered upon secrets, conspiracies layered amongst conspiracies. I jokingly refer to them as Space Knights mixed with the CIA.
Yeah. There's a vibe of like X-Files, the truth is out there that drips from this faction.
Yeah, and it kind of all stems from the Horus Heresy. So we're going to start there, right? Oh. Before the Great Crusade, right? Before the Emperor goes out into the stars, he had to create Space Marines. When he made Space Marines, he made his first legion of Space Marines. And that very first legion of Space Marines was taken from the best stock he could possibly find on Terra while fighting the Techno-Barbarians and everything else. And then he created the Space Marines to replace the Thunder Warriors. We're not going to get into who the Thunder Warriors are, except for that they were like the progenitors to Space Marines. But they had flaws, according to the Emperor, and needed to be expunged. That is terrible. It is terrible.
Or they might have been inconvenient, but it's a debate for another day. It's a debate for another day.
That first legion that fought against the Thunder Warriors with the Custodes was the Dark Angels. Like the original Dark Angels were the ones who did that. They then quickly grew to become the most numerous legion across the entirety of all of the Space Marines as they continued growing and growing and growing. And they started taking part in some of the toughest frontline battles for the Emperor while they were trying to recover the Primarchs. The first of which was the first Rangdan genocide, in which they were decimated. They took a ton of losses, but successfully pushed and secured a couple of systems for the Great Crusade from the Rangdan Empire at the time, which is this Xenos-based faction that came from beyond our galaxy and was enslaving all sentient life, like in entire sections of the galaxy. Then that makes them kind of suffer these weird, like morose moments of like reflection of like, well, like so many of us died doing this duty. Is it still worth doing this duty? Like we're recovering. Should we take a step back? And then in comes Lionel Johnson, which deserves an entire video of his own. But to know the simplest, barest terms is that he has a saying, and that saying is loyalty is your own reward. What he alludes to with that is that you shouldn't be loyal because of what you're going to get from it. You shouldn't do things because you want rewards. You should be doing things because you're loyal, and that loyalty is in itself the reason to do things. And this is what he teaches his sons when he first meets them. And it's very important that you know this part because so many of the Primarchs meet their sons, and when they do, it is either violent, terrible, or it completely warps them. The Lion doesn't do that. He just goes, keep being who you are. Just follow the rules, right? Not like the rules, but like the rule, the big rule, which is defend humanity. Like that's his big rule. And so he sides with the Emperor with that because he believes that that's what the Emperor is trying to do. And this is what fuels the Legion through the rest of the Great Crusades, including 2 more Rangdan genocides, in which Lionel Johnson leads from the front and goes to war with Xenos, goes to war with heretics, goes to war with everything. Loses his mind and loses a ton of men. I'm talking like decimates his Legion to about half of its strength by the time the Great Crusade is over, and he's on the fringe of the galaxy while the rest of the Crusade has moved on past him, all because he was told to do so. And he loyally followed orders, and is on the fringe of the galaxy when Horus is established as War Master. For those who know, listen to our Horus Heresy stuff, you know that the Horus goes on a heresy.
It's kind of a huge deal. It's the colossal deal. Holy God.
It's the huge thing.
It's the biggest thing.
And when this happens, the Lion immediately goes, well, I know whose side I'm on, and then just goes and finds Sanguinius. It's like the first thing he does. And then this is a good opportunity to sort of touch on before we get into the rest of the tragedy that is the Horus Heresy, that he doesn't just go to Sanguinius because he knew Sanguinius would be loyal. He goes to Sanguinius because it's his favorite brother, right? He references it even in the most recent book with the Lion in it, that he loved Sanguinius. Felt like an actual brother with Sanguinius.
Mm-hmm.
And so going and finding him when this happens is important because it shows you that he cared about his brother's opinion. And the Lion was not somebody who cared about many people's opinion. He mostly cared about his own. And when he goes to find Sanguinius, he also finds Guilliman, whom he does not like.
He respects Guilliman as being efficient in many sectors of logistics. And he's a decent strategist. And that's about all. That's the nicest thing he has to say about his brother.
He's like, yeah, man, you're pretty good in an Excel spreadsheet. Good news is that I can swing a sword really good, and that's what we need right now. And so the 3 of them sort of cut off from the rest of the Imperium, go to war with the Night Lords, and deal with something called the Ruin Storm, and have an entire section of the Horus Heresy dedicated to them involving something called the Imperial Secundus, and where they believe...
Again, another video.
Yeah, which, again, believes the Imperium's gone, it's not, and they slowly figure that out while also trying to deal with, this demonic incursion, and the Night Lords, and a bunch of stuff. All of that gets settled, and the Lion proceeds to go back to Caliban, his homeworld. And this is where he exits the Horus Heresy, does not take any more part in the Horus Heresy. His Legion, for the most part, doesn't take too much of a part in the Horus Heresy. They have pockets that are still around doing stuff, and the Siege of Terra, but as a huge whole Legion, they are not doing things. Because while the Horus Heresy is coming to a close, there is a betrayal that happens in the Legion at Caliban. For many different reasons. There's lots of different avenues and theories, but ultimately it's because Luther wants to save Caliban. In the Luther book, they kind of go over this, that Luther cared so much about the planet and his homeworld and where he was from, he was willing to sell himself and the souls of the men who were under him to Chaos to defend it, even if it was unwillingly. He was willing to do anything for the power to save it from what he thought was going to be a decimation. He looked upon Caliban and saw that it would become this industrialized wasteland built to just pump out engines of war, which really is sort of foreshadowing for what happens later, and could have been just Tzeentch's plot, but it was enough to get him to create these chaos cults of chaos worshippers that fracture the Legion. And when this happens, the Lion shows up and takes all of these astronomically powerful weapons and points them at Caliban and starts bombarding the planet. And these are weapons that are outlawed by the Emperor for use, that he has been trusted to use by the Emperor for dark destroyer tasks.
Which is a theme that's going to come up again as we move on to modern Legion.
And so he turns these terrifying weapons of war onto his homeworld and decimates the planet. And then teleports onto the planet with his loyal Dark Angels and start killing traitors. He finds Luther and they have a duel. During this duel, the planet completely fractures and intermingles with the chaos energies therein of, and it shunts the lion into a slumber that he sleeps for 10,000 more years. Luther also sleeps for 10,000 more years, and they're both hidden in the rock, which is this giant floating spaceship monastery that they call their new home now.
It's sort of like a mobile fortress. Like, that's the best way to think about it. It's like a mobile, Skeletor-looking He-Man castle. Like, it's colossal.
And the rest of the Caliban and the Fallen, which are the Dark Angels who have fallen from the Dark Angels' favor and have become traitors, are scattered across time and space via the warp. That is terrifying. Like, we're gonna pause there, because that's a whole lot, right? Like, there's just a ton that happens in the Horus Heresy involving the Dark Angels.
Well, and I think it kind of kicks off largely because of that saying, loyalty is its own reward. That for them, being loyal to your brothers matters much. But what if some of them brothers aren't necessarily trustworthy?
Right.
What are the ramifications of that domino effect?
One of the ongoing and prevalent themes in the Dark Angels is, like, the subordinates listen to what their superiors tell them to do. So if you're my knight captain and you're telling me that these are the orders we have to follow them to the letter, regardless of what we think is going to happen with it, and we do that and it ends up being the wrong move and traitorous, isn't that a problem?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or is it a problem? We didn't know.
But who's going to believe I didn't know?
Exactly. Right? That's where you can start seeing the conspiracy stuff starting to envelop the chapter. And then we move out of 30K, right? Like, the Horus Heresy happens, the Siege of Terror is over, everything's left. And in the aftermath, the Dark Angels are one of the only legions that are, for the most part, still mostly intact.
Compared to, like, the Salamanders or the Raven Wing stuff. Not Raven Wing, the Raven Guard, sorry.
Yes.
I was jumping ahead.
Yes.
Very different.
And so the Dark Angel are utilized across, like, the early 30K to deal with a lot of the larger threats starting to dominate, like, humanity. As the Imperium sort of degrades at a fast and accelerating rate from its dominance during the Great Crusade into the rotting carcass of a fascist empire that we see now. And through this time period, you get to see them also degrade, right? Where previously they were these, like, beautiful knights in black and red and silvers that were, like, defending and taking fight to these terrible beings, into these paranoid, fractured zealots almost, who have one goal, and that goal is to find the fallen, to hide their shame.
At any cost.
And hide
at any cost. Any cost. Which is very different than their original purpose of sort of question, with the intent being for good.
Yes.
You know, we look at the whole galaxy and we question it to better protect it. Now, whole cities could be annihilated just trying to find a handful of fallen space marines to murder them.
Yeah, and they continue doing this for 10,000 years. Like, don't get me wrong, there is still plenty of, like, good that the Dark Angels do in 40K, like, where they save worlds, they stop orc invasions, they fight the Tyranids, stuff happens, yada yada. But there's also moments like in the Siege of Rax, they show up and they obliterate a starport. They take a single guy, don't help break the siege, and just leave the planet worse than they came to it.
They showed up, destroyed a main hub of infrastructure, and then left. Just, like, please help me less. Help me less. It's like if I'm trying to replace an alternator, and your way of helping me is by throwing my 10mm socket across the yard. Like, could you please stop helping? I'd love it if you just quit helping me.
Yeah.
God, bastards. I love them. They're a great sort of protagonist, antagonist.
Well, they're both to themselves as well. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's one of those, it's like that meme of, oh yeah, Space Marines are coming to help us. Who are they? Dark Angels. Oh no! Entirely true. You really have no clue if they're actually there to help you or kill you.
Yeah, and really, they used to have so many different methods of organization for the chapter. They had this like elaborate scheme that had all these different like sub groups within like the organization that were for each individualized specialization, such as like stealth actions or decimation actions or fire support or like heavy armor. But it all sort of degrades over time and kind of adjusts into 3 separate wings of the Dark Angels, which are known as the Death Wing. Mostly Terminators, mostly like veterans, and just like big armored dudes who show up and do like single point surgical strikes or retrieval missions.
You might know these fellers from video games where you jump inside of Space Hawks and fight Tyranids.
Yes, they're on the new box for Dark Angels, which is just an entire Deathwing box with the new kits and stuff. There's the Raven Wing, which is what if like you were White Scars but edgy, and all they do is go out with land speeders and go out with bikes and go out with jet bikes, which they have like a jet bike, which it used to be the only jet bike, but now Custodies have them. We're not going to talk about it.
That's another video. The history of cool hover bikes in Warhammer 40k.
Yeah, the vroom biker gangs of the 41st millennium.
If those were Space Wolves, they'd be Borker gangs.
Anyways, the Raven Wing's job is to go out and find and hunt the Fallen, right? Hunt the things they're looking for, scout ahead, do it, and then drop the beacons for the Deathwing to show up. And then you have the one that Joe never forgets to tell me about.
What are they, John?
You want to say it?
No, you go ahead and say
it. The Green Wing.
Yeah, the Green Wing. John hates every time I bring up how crappy the Green Wing is as a name, and I don't know why he gets angry every time. I didn't write him, okay? It's just, all I'm saying is there was a definitive lack of inspiration between Deathwing, Raven Wing, Green Wing. Like, it doesn't work. I don't know why. John, I need you to just circle back with me, and we'll do a whole video about the Green Wing and how the hell is this name beside the other two.
Yeah, so with the Green Wing,
you almost did it. You almost did the inflection. Ooh, I'm working on it.
Is a group of just normal Space Marines, right? Like they're your intercessors, they are your normal tactical squads, they are Hellblasters, they are just the generic Swiss Army knife Space Marines, and that is the largest portion of the Dark Angels, is the Green Wing.
Well, that makes sense. Logistically, they're the ones that are the easiest to supply.
Yeah, they're the ones who are probably going out and fighting the Tyranids on the front line most often. And what makes this sort of unique amongst most of the chapters is that they are all painted differently or have different colors to them. The Deathwing have an ivory coloring to them. The Raven Wing have a black and silver, and the Green Wing have a red and green to them, with red being the accent color and green being the primary color. It makes them very striking on the table. And a little fun fact was originally they weren't supposed to be that. They're originally supposed to be black and red, but the printing of the original iteration of the Dark Angels made them look green, so people just paint them that way and never changed.
Too late.
Yep.
Sometimes you stumble into a really cool thing, and you don't fight it.
Yeah, but this period of time for the Dark Angels is kind of dark because there's not a ton there. Like there's individual fights, there's a thing involving Fenris and the Space Wolves. There's a rivalry between the two of them that goes back all the way through the Horus Heresy. Right? There's a lot to this story that we're just not going to be able to touch on today, because I really want to get to this last part because it's where the story is now, right? In the 42nd millennium, where we have the galaxy split in two, where Butte Gilliman's come back, but so have 3 demon primarchs in Magnus, Mortarion, and Angron. We have time after time, the Imperium's getting battered and battered and battered and battered and battered. Tyranids from the west, Tyranids from the east, Tau in the southeast, Chaos cults popping up all over the place, Cadia falls, and a huge cut sweeps across the galaxy. It is dire time. right? It is the worst time in the Imperium since before its inception. And now is when the lion wakes up.
A little late, but that's fine. That's fine.
Yep. And unlike Gilliman, who woke up looking still relatively young, the lion wakes up old. He wakes up having aged. His time asleep was not in perfect stasis. And he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know where he's at because he has woken up and then immediately done something that is called Forest Walk now, in which he has used the warp to sort of dimensionally shift himself and teleport through forests on places. So he is able to teleport through this forest of his mind palace that is in Caliban, and he is wandering through his own mental mind palace with assistance of the Watchers in the Dark, which are these like weird psychic Lovecraftian entities who have been on Caliban and follow the lion since he's a child. 2 different points in this book where he meets his former sons, and every one of these former sons he meets is another space marine he tried to kill. Right? It's another fallen son who explains to him why they fell, right? And explains to him the side of the story he doesn't know, which is that a lot of them didn't have a choice. A lot of them were told that these were the things that they had to do. It was loyalty to their superiors. It was because they were trying to defend Caliban. They didn't know if, the lion had turned traitor, right? They didn't know because the lion hid everything from them.
Yeah.
Did not tell them and just reacted immediately with judgment.
Because, if your whole goal is to defend Caliban, and, this is the home you love, and then out of the stars, during a heresy, a ship pops up and starts dropping bombs, I imagine I would assume the worst.
Yeah, and so for many of them, then when they meet him, they're immediately either they run, they try to fight him, or they are on the defensive, and they don't believe him. And he takes this to heart, and he starts just not doing that. Like in the best way possible, I can say that he asks for their forgiveness, and then hears what they have to say and gives them the choice, effectively telling them, everything my father fought for is dead. Everything that was left of the Imperium is rotting away. My only job and mission now is to defend humanity against its enemies. Will you do this with me? Then you are forgiven, and anyone who seeks to say otherwise, including my own father, should he ever return, is wrong. I forgive you, and I side with you. Which is big. Like, the lion forgiving people is not a thing he used to do.
The lion would give you the absolution of death. That was a thing.
Yes.
That was about all.
And so he spends the rest of this book sort of going around and finding his sons, and then ultimately deciding, when he meets one that he can't save, who has truly become a villain, who has truly become a heretic who worships chaos and seeks to dominate humanity, and has to kill him. Has no choice. And there's a quote from that book, which I think it kind of sums up that entire book really well, which is, I failed my father. I fear I also failed my brothers. I do not wish to fail my sons. Which is the good quote from that book. Like, loyalty is its own reward is pretty good, but I think this is emblematic of current Lion and what is going to become current Dark Angels.
Yeah, I think the Lion is at a point where he was, when we saw him at 30K, he was kind of young and impetuous. Life really hadn't rocked his shit yet. He ran around, he was cocky, he was impulsive, kind of a hotshot, kind of I know better than you at all times sort of situation. I think really the big danger for him is that was true enough that he could get away with it for a while without experiencing the worst consequences right off the bat to be corrected. But that can't last forever. And obviously, he couldn't back that up forever. He got absolutely rocked. He got put into a coma, and while sleeping, I guess you have time to think. And I gotta say, it's a big sort of departure from what I would expect of the Lion, because I only knew him really from the 30K representations of him. But I like the idea that he's tempered himself some. That now he's got to come back to this galaxy and find out what he's gonna do now, as opposed to what his goals were then. Because let's be honest, they were kind of shallow then.
Yeah, and I think it speaks volumes to where the direction where the character's going and also who he is, that his first reaction is, find my sons I formerly deemed as heretics and wanted to kill, and instead try to forgive the ones I can and execute the ones that can't be saved. Taking accountability for all of the things that he did and his part in it. And he calls these new Dark Angels that side with him and rejoin his side the Risen, which we will guarantee to see more of in the future. And they have a cool paint scheme that is just the old Peg scheme coming back in Modern 40K, but with like dark green cloaks, which is super cool.
I gotta, I am not a Dark Angels fan. I'm just be honest. They're a John faction. That's cool. I've never really been interested in the lore. I absorb some things secondhand. I read the Horus Heresy novels. I listen to John talk about stuff. They're involved in a lot of stuff tangentially. But I've never been like, wow, Dark Angels, cool. Until I heard about the Risen. That's a sick subfaction.
Yeah, it's super dope. Huge fan. They all use like mix-matched pieces of armor, mix-matched weapons. They crazy. They're great. Love them. And it's the perfect place to tell some like really cool novels in. But back to the like thing at hand, right? So they have this book where he gets a bunch of his guys back. And then at the end of the book, relatively, or like somewhere in the Arcs of Omen, essentially, he is joined with Dante of the Blood Angels, in which I believe he meets a Sanguinor and Dante, and like Sanguinor looks like Sanguinius, and Lionel Johnson's immediately pissed. He's like, "How dare you take the visage of my favorite brother?" And
Dante looks like Sanguinius. Dante wears the death mask.
And they figure it out. Like they chill. They chill.
Which also shows his growth, because they would not have chilled in Heresy.
And then Dante and the Lion sort of team up together with like the small forces the Lion has, but the Lion's also a Primarch. Now, the important bit here is he believes that he is out of touch. Like he believes that he is like a bad warrior now, and that he's old and decrepit and useless. But he says that and then proceeds to kill 10 Terminators on a ship by himself without taking so much as a scratch. So like,
I mean, he's not as good as he once was, but good enough. That song's going to be in my head now.
Yes. And then they sort of continue going around Imperium Nihilus, and the Wormwood incident happens at the end of the Arcs of Omen, right? Where Vashtor and Angron and Abaddon are on Wormwood, which is unconfirmed, but kind of confirmed to be Caliban. What's left of Caliban that was like
gathered in the
corrupted
warp.
by the warp, all together into one spot. And to sum up a bunch of stuff, Vashtor is trying to get a MacGuffin webway artifact. Abaddon wants to help him because he thinks it'll help his plans, and Angron's there because he's mad.
As always.
That's
keeping it easy.
That's the best description I can give you.
Easy breezy, beautiful.
One way or another, the current chapter master of the Dark Angels, Azrael, shows up to Wormwood because they see it as their homeworld, right? So they've showed up with the Rock, with their entire fleet, with everyone. And they go to war with the Black Legion and Vashtor's group of demons and the World Eaters on this planet. And they are losing. They know they're going to lose too. Like, they know they get their ass beat.
But I mean, how are you going to let the homeworld get corrupted? Like, if you got to die, this is where you're going to die.
Exactly. And that's when the Blood Angels show up, and there's a moment in this where the Dark Angels are like, holy shit, the Blood Angels are going to find out about the Fallen. The Blood Angels are going to find out about the Fallen. Shoot them. Shoot the Blood Angels. And you're reading it, and you're going, that's the stupidest thing you can do right now. Like, that's literally like the dumbest thing what? Listen, mom's going to find out you had a party already. Like, she's just going to be mad. You just got to deal with it.
Look, dude, I'm just here to help you clean the fucking house before she gets home. Like, don't punch me in the mouth. What are we doing?
Anyways, so the Blood Angels show up and they start helping, and that includes Dante, that includes the Sanguinary, that includes all of the heroes of the Blood Angels are now beaming onto the planet and helping Belial and Azrael and Asmodeus all fight Angron, Vashtor, Abaddon, the Black Legion, and they're just having this big holler brawl. And it all accumulates in a fight between Angron and all of these normal Space Marine heroes. And Angron wipes the floor with them. I mean, brutalizes some of them. Like, Belial is put in a wheelchair. Azrael almost gets put on a t-shirt. Like, it gets bad.
Even Dante, who is the most experienced living Space Marine, still gets bodied. Because, like, experience can make up for a lot of gap in power. Not that much gap. Not nearly that much gap. It's a demon primarch. Like, that's a self-contained nuclear bomb.
And not only a demon primarch, but it's Angron, the one who is best in single combat. Just because he is fury incarnate. Like, he keeps dying, being reborn and dying. He's like Doom guy, but bad. In
the worst way. Just like the worst way. And
yeah.
So, like, all of them get bodied in various lengths of time, but it does not take long. It's bad. Everything's going terribly.
And as Azrael's laying there, he's just like, well, this is how I die, with an angry, bat-winged man on my home turf. Cool. He looks up, and from the fog, he sees a hooded, cloaked figure step through.
Is it the Undertaker? Please tell me it's the Undertaker. That is not the Undertaker's walk-in song.
Whatever.
Oh my god, we are going to wrestle.
The hood falls back, and there's just the large helmet of Lionel Johnson. And Azrael knows who this is. He's never seen him before in his life, but he has seen the tapestries of him. He's seen the artwork. He instinctively knows who he is because it's his Primarch. Sees it and goes, oh my god, the Lion is here. Right? And the Lion proceeds to fistfight Angron with his sword fealty, which is a new thing, and the Emperor's shield, which he gets over the course of the book. Not gonna remember for you.
I highly recommend you read the book if you're interested in any of this, because we're just touching the surface of much of this lore.
Yeah, we're glazing it.
It's a fun book. I recommend it.
Yeah, so the Emperor's shield is really the big thing that comes in clutch here for against Angron, because by all measure he should die against Angron, but Angron got weakened by a bunch of the other heroes. Not necessarily tired, but he did take some hits. And really, what really sells the Lion winning is that he is an impeccable duelist, not because of his physical prowess, but because of his ability to calculate and measure his opponent in the middle of combat and capitalize on it. And he finishes this fight by luring Angron into a position where he can't defend himself, as the Lion beats him to death with the Emperor's shield. Just absolutely pummels him. But it's a bittersweet victory, because Vashtor and Abaddon get away with the artifact that they were trying to secure. They got away, taking it for a victory. And to make matters worse, Angron's not gone forever. Angron's gone for
7 days.
7 days, like 7 weeks, 7 months, right? Like, it's Korn's number, which isn't 7, it's 8. But
or is it 8? 8 days? Whatever. That number.
Should be 8 days. 8, right? Like, for 8 days, he is gone. That's not a long time. Like,
not for all of the lives you just spent. 8 days is not a lot.
So Angron's going to reform, and this sort of leaves us in a position where the Lion and the Dark Angels are at an impasse, right? The Dark Angels don't want to expose the Fallen secret. They don't want to accept the Risen. But they don't have a choice. The Blood Angels already know that the cat's out of the bag. The Nihilus is in dire straits. The Imperium is in dire straits. Gilliman doesn't know his brother's back yet. The Imperium doesn't know that Lionel Johnson's back yet. And we're going into this new codex and this new edition kind of going, what's gonna happen? Right? Like, where's this go? Because you have a Primarch in the main portion of the galaxy, and then you have the Lion in the northern part of the galaxy, just where Nightmare exists. And it's starting to look a lot like Imperial Secundus.
a little bit of a callback. There's even a sanguineous looking dude there. It's fine. I'm sure that won't come up at all. I'm sure it's totally cool. Cool.
So if you're a Dark Angels fan, it's a perfect time to be looking into the lore. It's a perfect time to be looking into like the models, and they have some cool new sculpts coming out. But really, like, this is the most bare bones take on Dark Angels. I cannot stress that enough. There is so much more here, and we're perfectly fine to delve more into that. Just let us know down below. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, whole 9 yards. Send us messages on Twitter, Instagram. Here, we'll talk to you. We'll talk about Dark Angels. If there's a chapter you'd rather hear about, we can talk about them too.
Anything you guys send in as a request, we pull it right to the top of the list. We appreciate those. And we appreciate y'all. For now, that's been all of our opinions, bona fide, and Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all in the next one.